Good evening, everyone. What is up? It is Fenna, and today we're going to talk about team compositions and how to structure a team in Overwatch so that you've hopefully got more chance of winning. Now, this is just going to be completely based off my experience from playing the closed beta, the second closed beta, ranked play, open beta, and a hell of a lot in release, and watching a bunch of pro games as well. Basically, I put a lot of time into Overwatch, and I've seen a hell of a lot of really bad team structures since release. So hopefully this little guide can help out some people with what hero to pick to flesh out a composition for a higher chance of winning the game. So the biggest problem you're going to see in quick match if you're queuing alone or just with a friend is the fact that everybody wants to play DPS. So you'll often see people pick like 5 DPS, and then someone will switch up like, oh, we need a support, and then someone, oh god, we need a tank, and then you'll have a tank and a support, leaving you with 4 DPS, 1 tank, and 1 support. This is not the way to go. The typical solid composition that seems to work very often is 2 tank, 2 support, and 2 DPS. And this is kind of seen in competitive pro games as well, and it's just what I've experienced working well in quick match. Alright, so first off, we have a slot for 2 tanks. We're going to dedicate this to the main tank slot and the off tank slot. So the main tank slot is very often soaked up by Reinhardt, especially on assault maps, payload maps, and hybrid maps. He's just great for standing there, soaking up all the damage for your team. They can hide behind him and go through a choke point really well, or he can sit on a payload and your team does really well. Now then, we've got the off tank slot, which is a lot more versatile. We very often see Winston here. He does really well, but that doesn't mean he can't be filled by a Roadhog, which we've seen sometimes in competitive games as well. And then of course the Zarya and D.Va, and none of them are exceptionally weak. You can kind of get away with any of them, and there's a lot more combinations you can go for as well. Like double Zarya used to be extremely strong, and we often see double Winston for faster strategies. In fact, on control point maps in competitive games, we pretty much see double Winston every time, but that is specific to control point maps. Alright, so let's move on to the damage. This is where things get a little bit more complex. Technically, we have 3 slots for damage, which is part of the off-tank slot, which becomes a flexible slot. But let's focus on the main 2 damage slots first. First of all, you need 2 extremely solid damage dealers. If you do not have 2 extremely solid damage dealers, you will just struggle to put out enough damage in the game. And this is a very common place where quick match compositions go wrong, where they're picking Tracers, Genjis, Hanzos, etc., or just the wrong hero for the map. So the main solid DPS heroes are McCree, Pharah, Soldier, and Widowmaker. However, I would be careful with the Widowmaker because the Widowmaker player needs to be incredibly good to make Widowmaker solid. Now, that's not the only 4 heroes you can use in this slot. There are some more situational heroes. Torbjorn, Junkrat, and Bastion can all be fantastic defense heroes on the right map in the right situation. But if you don't know where and why they are good, I would stay away from them and stick to the main solid DPS heroes at first. Next up is the off-tank slot, the flexible damage slot. So generally, you'll probably want to start a game with 2 tanks. However, this slot can be used for a more specialized DPS, like a harassment hero, Tracer, or Genji, or a hero that can be used to counter your enemy's heroes. So for example, let's say you're opening with a Reinhardt, a Zarya, a McCree, and a Soldier. Now, the enemy's got 3 Winstons. Who's the best hero against Winstons? Reaper. You don't want your solid DPS switching off there. You want to get your off-tank, Zarya, switch her off and get yourself a Reaper. Reaper is going to crush those Winstons, but you're not losing the base of your composition, which you really need. Either way, this slot is just extremely flexible and should either be used to counter what your opponent is doing or play to whatever the map is. Now, typically, this is how your composition is going to look for pretty much every assault, hybrid, or payload map, and it's what you'll see competitive and pro teams using. I've got a little bit more to say on control point, but we'll get to that after we talk about the supports. Alright, so finally, the support slot, probably the easiest slot to fill, as there just aren't many supports. Now, 99% of the time here, you're going to see Lucio and you're going to see Mercy on both offense and defense. They are just the strongest supports. They both heal. They've both got incredibly powerful ultimates, and they just work really, really well together. Now, there is also Symmetra, who is used quite a lot in pro games, and she is incredibly powerful. She's generally used on defense, on a map, at the first point where she can make the most use out of a teleporter, and she has time to set up turrets. Obviously, she's not that great on offense. And then there's the specialized Zenyatta. Zenyatta is very, very rarely used. He's generally used to take down heavy tank compositions. You throw that Discord on there, and then you can help out with your team. But he is definitely going to need Reinhardt protection, as he's made of paper. If you do take Symmetra, you probably want to go with Mercy as well, as she's a little bit stronger on defense with Symmetra rather than Lucio, because the problem with Lucio on defense is that the shield with his ultimate is just not as useful as the Resurrect, because, for example, if you see enemies attacking and you pop the shield, they can easily just walk away and wait for the shield to run out. With Mercy, if they attack and they kill everyone, you can just dive in and res everyone. But typically, if you pick Lucio and Mercy here, you've made some good picks. Okay, so we've got a good idea of how to build a very solid composition on assault maps, payload maps, and hybrid maps. Now, you might have been watching some pro games and you've seen something like double Winston, double Lucio, and then a double DPS like McCree. Now, this still follows the same principles of the 2-2-2 lineup. However, it is a little bit crazier, and I didn't touch on it too much. This is a very specific control point built composition for high-level teams, and the reason why it works so well is because Winston is fantastic on control point. It's such a hectic game mode, there's people everywhere, it's very close range. Winston is great once he gets close range, the shield helps out massively, and his taser just happens to hit a lot of things while he just waves it around and doesn't really aim. Then you've got double Lucio, which is great because you have both auras, which are constantly hitting everyone because it's a very confined map in a small space and everybody's close range. And then why double McCree is picked a lot is because, well, McCree is pretty much the strongest close range hero who shreds tanks and shreds pretty much every other close range DPS. And that's why you see that. But it still does follow the guidelines of 2 tank, 2 DPS, and 2 support. Anyway, guys, I really hope this gave you a good idea of how to build a solid composition. Again, this is not something to live by. Overwatch is a very complex game with loads of heroes, loads of maps that vary heavily. There's lots of counters and all of that. It's just an idea of where to start. And if you're playing solo or duo like me, it'll allow you to fill that last spot really nicely to make yourself a stronger composition and give yourself a higher chance of winning. I hope you enjoyed this, guys. I really hope it helped you out, and I'll see you guys tomorrow in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.